From the CBS Newsroom in New York, this is the CBS Morning News.
Today marks Jimmy Carter's last official day of being president. To honor his presidency, let's look at the events that have occurred in the past 4 years. President Jimmy Carter rose to presidency in a time of disparity and economic decline, which was left behind by former President Gerald Ford. Carter was left to deal with inflation and raised unemployment rates right when he entered office. There was slow economic growth as 7.3% of the workforce did not have jobs. He pushed for a comprehensive consumer protection bill, which resulted in shallow public support.
As an incoming president and even before his presidency, Carter wanted a new morality for the nation: human rights. He emphasized this idea greatly during his campaign and gained a lot of attention from the people. His policy was to create a post-war change that would improve the relations between America and the eastern side of the world, including the Soviet Union, while still protecting American interests. President Carter did this because he believed in holding accountable for America's allies as well as its adversaries for their human rights failings, an approach that risks straining relations with friends and widening existing rifts with foes.
As long as I am president, the government of the United States will continue throughout the world to enhance human rights.
Later on in the year, one of Carter's first challenges was Panama. In September 1977, Carter signed the Torrijos-Carter Treaties, which returned the Panama Canals to the Panamanians of Panama. This started due to the 1964 anti-American riots in Panama by students. From then, the U.S. and Panama tried to negotiate with each other, and soon after 14 years, Carter and General Omar Torrijos signed two canal treaties. The signing gave the United States the permanent right to defend the canal's neutrality. Panama was able to have its control over the canal.
After the Love Canal explosion in 1978, it can be seen that land used for home settlement had waste disposal drums within them. The explosion left small seeds of chemicals and puddle of noxious substance. Some could be spotted on yards, basements, and even school grounds. Toxins were prominent in the air as many children got burns when coming in contact with mineral outdoors. The chemicals were mostly identified as carcinogens and caused birth defects for many children who were born and raised in the area. Aware of the situation, President Carter approved of the emergency financial aid for the Love Canal area, even though the aid was only mainly provided for natural disasters, which the Love Canal incident was clearly not.
Nobody ever thought that the day would come, nor it was possible that President Carter would actually be able to do so. On September 17, 1978, after days of long talks and negotiation, Carter was able to get the Egyptian President Sadat and the Israel Cabinet Minister Menachem Begin to sign the Camp David Accord. War between the two had started since 1948, the establishment of Israel. Arab-Israel wars, which started in 1948, was due to the declarations of Israel independence early on in May. Doing so, Carter became known as the peacemaker and ended the war between the two countries. This is a huge and wonderful achievement, and marked the first step in achieving peace.
On March 28, 1979, human operators of the nuclear plant on 3 Mile Island had misread the status of the pressure valves and cooling system of the plant, which led them to shut off both the reactor and the cooling system. The residual heat from the nuclear fission caused the core to have a meltdown and release deadly radiation drifts toward the countryside, causing fatal sickness for many people in the area. President Carter arrives at the scene on April 1st to inspect the plant, as he was a trained nuclear engineer with experience. His arrival helped calm down the locals as well as the whole nation.
The steps that I am taking today will help to assure that nuclear power plants are operated safely. Safety, as it always has been and will remain, is my top priority.
On January 2nd of 1980, Carter has postponed the SALT II treaty with the Soviet Union as the Soviets intervened into the Afghanistan lands on December of 1979. Soviets established their own puppet government in the country to reinforce the communist regime against the Islamic forces. This action ruined the progress of the U.S.-Soviet relationship and ended the détente between the two countries, as well as the diplomatic and economic relations that was established by Nixon earlier on in early 1970s.
On December 11, 1980, Carter signed into law the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act. It was a federal government program designed to fund the cleanup of sites contaminated with hazardous substances and pollutants. The act gave the Environmental Protection Agency the legal authority they had lacked in the past.
Breaking news. We can finally say the Iran hostage crisis is over. After 444 days of Americans being held hostage, they were finally freed and unharmed on this day. This started on November 4, 1979, when a group of Iranian students broke into the U.S. Embassy and held over 60 Americans as hostage. This took place at Tehran. It is told that these students wanted to stop the U.S. from interfering with any of their other affairs. Deeper into this conflict, it dated way before when the U.S. and Iran had issues over oil. Fed up with the way Shahs ruled their land, they turned to Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, who swore to make changes.
Of course, Carter couldn't hope to keep all the spotlight on himself. No one could forget these other remarkable people that gained some fame of their own during these last 4 years. John Lennon, you may have heard of him, but if you hadn't, well, he's a member of the ever-popular Beatles. In fact, he wrote many of their hit songs that we all know and love. Such songs like Hey Jude, Imagine, I Am the Walrus, Come Together, and many more. But the curtains must close eventually, and for Mr. Lennon, well, the curtains fell suddenly as he was shot and killed on December 8, 1980. However, it wasn't the only blow to the music industry that we faced. Just 3 years before, Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, on August 16, 1977, he passed away due to a heart attack. One of his closest high school friends was able to express his favorite moment with Elvis. Here we have a clip.
He gave me a car once, and I said, Elvis, I don't have the words to express how I feel to you about you giving me this car. And he looked at me and he said, what is fame and fortune if you can't share it with your friends?
But enough of the negative news. Let's bring our spirits back up just a tad. One of my personal favorite stories during these last 4 years, a true champion. May I introduce the human lightning rod, Roy Sullivan. This man, Roy Sullivan, he's got the ability of being struck by lightning. I kid you not, he has been struck 7 times and is still alive and moving. With his luck, I'd go buy some lottery tickets.
Now, on 2 minutes of pop culture, I'll be here to explain all the trends and hits from the 1970s to the 1980s in just 2 minutes. First off, did you guys know Star Wars Episode 4 was released on May 25th, 1977? It turned out to be one of the highest grossing films in the world. Episode 5 was then released in 1980. 2. 1971 was the start of the golden age of arcade games, probably at its peak right now. First ever game that started this age was Space Invaders, released in 1978. 3. Punk rock. Who doesn't love a good rock song? Hits such as songs from Ramones, Blondie, and the Heartbreakers were playing everywhere. But don't forget, disco was here and here to stay. Punk rock was coming up in the music industry, but disco hasn't lost its heat. 4. Miracle on Ice, a game no one in America will ever forget. When the US Olympic hockey team won in 1980 against the Soviet Union, the world made a big deal over it. Although the Cold War was dying down, winning this hockey game gave Americans a sense of pride.
To nothing. Long shot, the easy save by Tretiak, but Johnson is there and scores with 1 second to play in the period.
Well, that's all I have for now.
From our newsroom in New York, this has been the CBS Morning News.